Caleb Williams featured on the cover of Esquire.
Yep.
And it's a very good story on, I mean, it really hits on everything about Caleb Williams. The cover says the making of a next generation quarterback, but the headline on the actual story, if you read it, is the unusual life of Chicago Bears quarterback Caleb Williams. Last year's #1 draft pick, walks in fashion shows, hangs out in Europe, and has a business empire next on his list, winning a Super Bowl.
As the interview was taking place in Denmark.
Correct.
In Scandinavia.
Yeah.
I love that he's going overseas. I love that he's following his girlfriend around. I love everything about this article. I love that we're getting to talk about it.
Well, yeah, his girlfriend is from Denmark. If you didn't know that, she's still a student in Copenhagen. So he spent a big portion of his offseason in Denmark. Good for him.
Oh, yeah.
You ever been to Denmark?
It's on my list. I really want to go.
I want to go to Denmark too. Braggs?
Egypt's first for me.
Egypt?
Yeah, I want to go to Egypt really
I'll go
bad.
to Egypt with you. Let's go Egypt, Denmark too for the three of us on a trip, no families.
I wouldn't be opposed to Denmark, but there's just like a pecking order.
Hogue just had a straight heart attack on the show.
I'll drop you guys off in Egypt on my way to Denmark.
Is it on the way?
Nobody
Close,
can be.
close enough, buddy.
Whose jet are we using for this?
The Dukes.
The Dukes.
Shout out the Duke. Long lost Duke.
Anyway, I got a million takeaways from this. I think we just kind of piece it, try to go in order.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a funny part early where he kind of forgot how many games they actually lost last year.
Yes.
That was funny. But yes, he's like, I never lost 10 games in a season. Dude, you lost 12.
But he admits that like he makes fun of himself for not remembering the exact number.
Yeah, he said, I'll be honest with you, I've never lost this much. I lost 10 games in one season. I think maybe 11. It's like, no, you lost 12.
And then he goes, I think it was actually more than 11, which it was. It was 12, 10 in a row. But he gets a little, vulnerable in this, saying around his teammates, Williams tried to conceal his frustration, but his emotions spilled out in private after a couple of the late season losses. Quote, when I got home, I got in my bed, I just dropped a few tears. And I was just so beat up mentally, physically, spiritually. So, I mean, I think this is the first time that we're hearing, I think he sort of hinted at how hard last year was, but I think he's, even in interviews he's done with us, try to conceal it a little bit to the levels that it got. But it's very obvious from reading this, and it shouldn't be a surprise. Last year sucked. Yeah. I mean, I think we were beat up mentally, physically, and spiritually. So I can only imagine how he felt.
Well, and he brought up how he'd go home when it got to the back end of that 10-game losing streak. He was like going home and shedding a few tears because it was getting under his skin so much, right? And Cole Kmet, when he was here, doing these shows week to week, you could feel it, how much it was wearing on these guys. And so that Green Bay game, I know the Bears aren't picking 7th here in 9 days, and they're picking 10th. But for the mental well-being of all these guys on this team that are rolling over into this year, that game was huge. It really was.
I was having that argument yesterday in our Discord channel, Become a Diehard. Great way to do it, $36, and you get access to our private chats that I was having with some of the greatest people on earth, the people that have supported us. Thank you so much. And I just floated it in there. Anybody want to be picking 7th and not have that Green Bay win? And everybody yelled at me, and then I left and went and did the rest of my day. So everybody,
okay. In all seriousness though, does what he says in this story change you off that take that you've had basically since week 18?
No, but I do find it. It doesn't. But I'd rather be picking 7th.
Will you at least meet us halfway on it?
All right. Well, let me read the quote though for people that haven't seen the story. So,
yeah, go ahead.
The reporter asked Caleb for his best moment from his first time through the NFL grind, and he immediately says beating the Packers.
Well, yeah, I get it. It was a huge – listen, there are plenty of benefits to that win. They've talked about being 1-0. They don't have to, most importantly, at least in my mind, they don't have to carry a losing streak into next season, which would be a way to be talked about. I think all of that is a win. Now, if you're telling me that you could end up with the guy that you wanted at 7 and not at 10, I'm going to bet on these guys that they can get through carrying that, and they need impact players still. But regardless of all of that, back to your original where you kicked off this whole conversation, quote, when I got home, I got in my bed, I just dropped a few tears, and I was just so beat up mentally, physically, and spiritually. That's a interesting reveal right there. And, it's one thing to cry in the moment, right? You lost. It's overwhelming.
And remember that happened in college. He was criticized for that.
Yeah. To actually be able to just to think about where you're at, to go home and be that overwhelmed that this is too much, that you're emotional way after the fact. That shows that, the impact of last season was significant, and to me that's a lot to build yourself back up from.
Well, let's have to kind of have a serious conversation about this. The story paints a lot of all the stuff we've already known about Caleb, the fashion shows, the business empire he's trying to build, the investment firm they've started. He's apparently, some of that venture capitalist money has gone through to Elon Musk's AI Grok thing
and solar panels.
And that's a separate business he's separating to fund a solar panel business. Was like in Georgia. Is that where it was? I
got it.
There's a lot going.
Different states.
Heliostar Solar. The company should have its first solar panel installations in the Virginia area.
He's
Your
flying.
favorite.
We talked about this yesterday. Flying to Coachella on the weekend in between weeks at Hallis Hall, part of the offseason program, posting these photos on Instagram. There's all this stuff, and I think it does bring a very valid question that is nothing new. These are the same conversations that we had about Caleb Williams last year during the draft process, which was the Bears wanted to make sure he loves football. That all these other interests he has, which Lincoln Riley's quoted in here too, saying he's got a lot of interests. He's a very unique young man.
Quote, he's just a very interested young man in all kinds of things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's all fine. And I'll just speak for myself. Like, I have no problem with that whatsoever, as long as your number one is your job. You're paid by the Bears, right? And in the meantime, you have to love football, and you have to be committed to football. And I do think that this story and some of the nuggets in here help paint this well-rounded picture that all of these things can be things that he really does care about. I mean, he obviously was affected by the losses. There's a million quotes in here, not a million. I'm not being hyperbolic, obviously, but there's at least 3 or 4 quotes in this story about how he's scouting himself at one point. He's clearly saying what he needs to get better at.
Yep.
And he's saying that he's going to be committed. And then his business partners in the story too, saying that like during the season when he's in football, like we take all this stuff off his plate. He's doing football, except for the bye week.
Yep. He was asked to scout himself from last year, and he said, talented, has work to do, going to get a lot better, learning, gets better throughout the game, processing, and then taking more checkdowns, and then footwork. I think those three are big for my game that I'm going to be working on. And I thought that was interesting that he said that. I also thought, depending on when the timeline of this interview took place, were those the things that Ben Johnson told him he was going to work on: processing, footwork, and checkdowns. I mean, those are pretty simple, but the simple is what makes you great in this league.
Well, let's try to live in reality for just a second here. Try to put yourself in his shoes.
Okay.
His new favorite setup. This has been like a 2-month thing now.
It's
Live in reality.
Yeah.
Well, look, he made, by estimation, by guess, roughly $10 million when he was in college. Okay, because of NIL and everything that he set up. So he walked into the NFL with $10 million in the bank.
More than that, for sure.
Maybe more than that. Okay, so just put yourself in that shoes. You're 22 years old. You got $10 million. Now you just got your first NFL contract. $25 million of it is guaranteed. So I'm not a math expert here, but 25 plus 10, I believe that's $35 million, okay? And He's got endorsements. It's more than that. So let's say comfortably after this first contract, the dude's got, say, 50 in the bank. All right. And now you're talking about a guy that's got a lot of interests, right? So you got $50 million to play with. That's an insane amount of money. So, and I'm saying this, no shade to Caleb whatsoever. Congratulations. That's amazing. I'd kill to be you, all the things, 25 years old with $50 million. But to ask a 25-year-old who has a ton of interests with $50 million in the bank, hey, man, focus on this and this only, and this is, and dial it in, even though you are set for life and so are your kids and your grandkids' kids if you do the right things, it's a different cat that would put that aside, all that money aside, all that comfort aside, and grind his ass off every single day to be the best that he could be. Now, maybe he'll do it. There's certain guys, the money doesn't matter to them at all. The security doesn't matter. Tom Brady had all the money in the world, and he kept on grinding every day. But I'm saying the part of it, living in reality, you're rich. You don't need to work another day in your life. You don't need to do a damn thing. Hogue, if he had $50 million, he would have walked off the set here 3 years ago and gone to a beach. You think he'd be doing this every single day? This guy,
he'd have been at the Masters last week.
Oh, hell yeah.
Right. So, like,
I would have been at Coachella with
the other 68 private jets that flew out all at the same time. Did you see that graph?
Dude, they come into Chicago, too. If you like the executive airport, they just, if like a few hours after the Masters end, they all just start.
Right.
You could see them coming in.
I think one of the private jets might have been Michael Jordan, because Carm, to what you're talking about right now, Jordan was ahead of this 15 years ago or 10 years ago. There was an interview that he did where he talked about the difference between when he was coming up as a pro to players nowadays, and where he had to earn his way to his certain status to get Nike to buy into him, to get the big brands, to build his personal empire. He had to find his way as an athlete first.
Right.
And now the cart is coming before the horse. And that's not a Caleb thing. That's every college athlete, that's at that echelon. And so that can create some obstacles for guys to maintain that level of competitiveness and focus, because if Caleb Williams wants to build an empire outside of football, that's smart. You've seen time and again, was it Bernie Kosar that's shed light on how many players have come out of the league and then they end up broke? So he's being smart and judicious on how he's going to finish his life after football. But in order to build your empire the way Tom Brady has or Michael Jordan has, your empire has to be built on the greatness of what you are, and that's a great quarterback in this league. And I certainly think he understands that. But one of the quotes for me, guys, that really stood out to me, and I hope we see more of this from Caleb, was from one of his college coaches, and he talked about when he played through a hamstring injury in the Pac-12 championship loss to Utah, refused to come out of the game, battled through the pain to try to bring his team back. And this is what Benny Wiley said, USC's strength and conditioning coach. In that moment, I saw the real him, the competitor, the dog, the guy that's driven, the guy that nobody really gets to see. And so that was probably the moment I knew, this dude's a real guy. That really stood out to me. I want him to show as much of that as he possibly can, because this is the city. We talk about Michael Jordan ad nauseum in this city. I know kids get sick of it, but that was the thing that was the mark of Michael Jordan, was that quote. And he brought that every shot, every play, every game. He made sure the fans knew that they were going to get their money's worth, because Michael Jordan was going to show you who he was that day. And for my hope is that Caleb Williams can find that competitiveness every single time he steps out on that football field.